Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving deep into the two contrasting souls of northern Vietnam, the ancient, thrumming capital of Hanoi and the rugged, mountainous world of Sapa. We're going to see how these two polar opposites actually come together to form a single, incredibly dynamic identity. Okay, so let's get right to the heart of it with our big idea for today, what we're calling the Northern Nexus. Now, this is really the key to understanding this entire region. It's the concept that northern Vietnam isn't just one thing, but a powerful synthesis of two very different forces, the ancient urban civilization of Hanoi and the remote, culturally rich highlands of Sapa. So here's our game plan. First, we'll unpack this nexus and really define these two realities. Then, we're going to jump back in time to see how French colonialism shaped them into two very different worlds. From there, we'll explore how local cultures fought back, survived, and adapted. And finally, we'll connect all that history to the very real challenges both places are grappling with today. All right, first up, let's firmly plant the two poles of this nexus in our minds. On one side, you've got Hanoi. Think of it as the heart of the Red River Delta, a center of politics, culture, and power for well over 1,000 years. And on the other side, Sapa, a remote highland town defined by its jaw-dropping landscapes and the diverse ethnic communities who've called those mountains home for centuries. Okay, so now let's see how a completely new order was forced onto this landscape. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the French didn't just conquer northern Vietnam, they fundamentally remade it. And crucially, they had very different blueprints for Hanoi and Sapa. Now, to really get a handle on Sapa's colonial story, you first have to understand this key concept, the hill station. As the source material puts it, these were basically created as sanctuaries from the death in the tropics. And that's not an exaggeration. For French officials baking in the brutal heat and humidity of Hanoi, the cool, fresh mountain air of a place like Sapa was a literal lifesaver. And this slide just lays it out perfectly, doesn't it? The visions were polar opposites. Hanoi was re-engineered to be this grand stage for imperial power, the capital of French Indochina with massive boulevards and imposing buildings. Sapa, though, was developed for the exact opposite reason. It was an exclusive escape from all that pressure, a health resort where the colonial elite could go to recover. One was built for control, the other for release. So you might be wondering, was this colonial culture just accepted? Well, in Hanoi, something totally fascinating happened. The French set up an art school, probably thinking they'd train locals in a nice, traditional French style. But it completely backfired. The school ended up becoming a hotbed for some of the most radical, modern ideas in global architecture. We're talking the international style of people like Le Corbusier. And this quote from Nguyen Cao Luan, a young Vietnamese architect at the time, wow, it just reveals this incredible ambition. He and his classmates weren't just there to learn a trade. They aimed to possess the spirit of an artist and, get this, to be able to compare themselves to foreign artists. This wasn't just about buildings. This was a powerful declaration of cultural and intellectual equality. So next, let's look at how, despite these powerful external forces, these deep-rooted local cultures showed this incredible resilience. Because this story isn't just about what was imposed on Vietnam. It's about what was already there and what simply refused to be erased. In Hanoi, you can literally see this resilience layered in the earth. The Imperial Citadel of Thong Long is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, not because of one single building, but because it shows 13 straight centuries of political power in one spot. It started as a Chinese fortress, became the capital of an independent Vietnam, and then was built on, over, and over by dynasty after dynasty. And right alongside that, you have the city's commercial heart, the Old Quarter, which has been buzzing for nearly 1,000 years. Its whole structure is like a living museum of Vietnam's ancient guild system. Each street, like Hung Bac, Silver Street, was traditionally home to a specific craft. It's this amazing testament to a commercial and creative history that just kept going, right next door to all that colonial power. Meanwhile, way up in the highlands, Sapa's identity comes from a totally different source. It's ethnic minority communities. You have the Hmong people, who are just renowned for their incredibly vibrant and intricate textile work, these story cloths that literally weave their history for future generations. And you have the Dao people, who have this incredibly deep spiritual and practical connection to the mountains themselves. These are the cultures that form the true soul of Sapa. Okay, so now let's take all that rich history and apply it to the intense pressures that both Hanoi and Sapa are under today. Because those original colonial purposes, Hanoi as a center of power, and Sapa as a pristine escape, well, they directly shape the very different kinds of threats they now face from hypergrowth. And this brings us to a huge, crucial question, one that historic places all over the globe are wrestling with. When a place becomes a global hotspot, how does it avoid losing the very thing that made it special in the first place? In Hanoi, we've got some new research that actually quantifies this threat. And what it shows is that the biggest impact on the old quarter's historic character isn't just regular tourism. It's these newer economic forces, things like booming nightlife and massive new complexes. These are driving what the researchers call intense facade and trade changes, basically eroding the small-scale, craft-based identity that made the quarter so resilient for a millennium. So what do you do about it? Well, researchers are pushing for proactive management. And this isn't just about saying no to everything. It's about smart strategies like creating stricter guidelines for the most impactful businesses, designing projects to protect key historic streets, and even helping local merchants with practical things like what kind of signage looks appropriate to preserve that historic spirit. Sapa, on the other hand, is facing a transformation that's even more dramatic and a lot faster. A single piece of infrastructure, that fancy pan cable car that opened in 2014, unleashed one of the fastest tourism booms in all of Asia. The very thing Sapa was founded to escape, massive development, is now threatening to completely overwhelm the pristine landscape that was its whole reason for being. All right, so after that journey through history, culture, and modern economics, how do we tie all these threads together? What does the big picture of the Northern Nexus look like today? If you only remember 3 things from our deep dive today, make it these. First, that Northern Vietnam is defined by this duality, this synthesis of city and mountain. Second, that colonialism reshaped the region, sure, but it also sparked this incredible creative and intellectual response from the Vietnamese people. And third, that today, this unique heritage is at a crossroads, directly threatened by its own global popularity. And we'll end with a final thought, because the story of this Northern Nexus is still being written. That tension between preserving a profound past and embracing a high-speed future, well, that's the defining drama of Northern Vietnam today. And the question of whether that delicate balance can be maintained is still very much up in the air.